Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Maraya Brown. Welcome to the show, Maraya. I'm so excited to have you on. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm looking forward to it's amazing how swiftly we met and how swiftly we're just popping on here and getting to know one another as we go.
For sure. And you're right. It was like quick and it all lined up perfectly, which I love. So thank you for joining us. You're the CEO and founder of the Women's Vibrancy Code. And you're going to be talking with us today about women's hormones, women's health, being kind of balance and imbalance related to hormones, plus a few other things that I'm excited to learn more about. So why don't you start by telling us, Mariah, how did this all come to be for you? What was the progression that led to this?
Yeah, let's think. The quick synopsis is I finished my nurse practitioner training at Yale University in 2007, and I had been running the women's health in federally funded clinics and private practices, and I was certified nurse midwife, so also attending births. Then I ended up building a Facebook group with some friends, and it grew like wildfire. And along the journey, the Facebook group was focused on vetting experts and products that could help women along their women's health journey from a non-pharmaceutical perspective. As I was doing this, I was meeting all these experts from around the world that had online work and online courses. I had never even heard of such a thing. And so this was like 2018, 2019. I finally just decided I'm going to give it a try. 2019, I finished working at the brick and mortar practice, and I thought, I love running the women's health. I was at a local functional medicine practice, and of course, created big impact and big change in women. But it felt like I was perpetually giving them a fish rather than teaching them to fish. And I was also limited to the women that lived here in my geography. And so this idea of starting the Women's Vibrancy Code was a way for me to empower women to not only feel better and not feel so exhausted and have answers to their hormones and address the emotional lability and viper that can come out and the sleep stuff and the weight stuff and so many symptoms that women struggle with, but also to help them really understand why what I was suggesting was working. The last 4 years has been tremendous and so fun. I have courses and programs and women's retreats and my own podcast. And it all started out simply being a women's health provider that was passionate about helping women really feel empowered about their bodies, to feel educated, and to also know that a pharmaceutical or a prescription has its role, but there's so many other things that we can do foundationally, either with or without the prescriptions.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that journey with us. And it's true that we are only able to help so many people when we're one on one, or as you were working in a particular clinic, limiting. But opening it up as you have, you really can serve so many more people and really make a change in so many more women's lives. I love that. And I want to talk a little bit more about what you just touched on there at the end, and that's how medical side of it has its role and its place where there's so many other things that are available. And so expand on that for us. Tell us what you mean
Yeah.
exactly by that.
Yeah. I think for the most part, mainstream medical training is really based on the foundation that looks like this. What's your symptom? What lab do I order? What's your diagnosis and prognosis? And what's your prescription?
Mhm.
And once again, I don't think all prescriptions are bad, but I do think that we're missing the boat. And so often what's missed is, what about diet modification? I really believe Hippocrates had it right. Let thy food be thy medicine, let thy medicine be thy food. What about personalized supplementation? What about lifestyle and stress reduction and sleep habits and relationship habits and addressing stories of worthiness and self-loathing? In all of that plays a role. And so as I developed this program, I had to go, you know what? This is multidisciplinary. So what I have created, there is a multidisciplinary approach. We're looking, yes, at nutrition and supplementation as well as mindset and trauma release and our relationship with our sexuality and our sensuality, because I don't think that we can completely work in silos. So sometimes we might take a prescription, like for instance, in 2014, I had lived in Hawaii for 7 years and worked as a midwife and a nurse practitioner there. And then when we were pregnant with baby number 2, it's time to head home. And so we moved back to Southern Oregon, my husband and I. And I'm a type A personality, overachiever. Moved back. I was managing our house and our rental still in Hawaii, living in Oregon, running a network marketing business. Oh, by the way, happened to plan my 20-year class reunion because here I am back home. I might as well. And a family reunion with 33 family members with a 1-year-old and just about to give birth. Like, of course, the typical type A personality. And postpartum, I was exhausted and my body hurt and I was sad and I was having strange rashes and I didn't want to be touched by my husband and I was embarrassed. And here I was as the women's healthcare provider in the community where other providers referred their patients to me. And somehow I look back and I go, it was so foolish of me. I continued to give to everybody else without actually listening into my own body's cues. So in my scenario, my thyroid and my adrenals crashed. And so, yes, I went on thyroid medication and wow, that levothyroxine, it was like, oh, the lights are off. There's life again. But it wasn't just that. It was also looking at, oh, okay, what diet modifications can I take that are going to serve and fuel my adrenals and my thyroid? Can I add in some supplements? I need to be honest with my ability to say no and address all of the other factors that were at play to get me to where I was. Now, I could have just seen a regular PCP who maybe would have sent me to an endocrinologist, maybe not. They give me a prescription and send me on my merry way. But I don't think that's what serves us. I'm not opposed to getting prescriptions, particularly so many women benefit from bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. But once again, I don't believe that we are served by just doing that. There are a lot of
Yeah.
other factors. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing that personal story with us of your own experience. And I think that there is so much to what you said. We so often take on so many things. We're balancing so many roles and so many spinning plates. And you're absolutely right. We are not just one part. We are a whole. We've got to look at all of those pieces together to make the whole. And so you can't just focus necessarily on one aspect with ignoring all of the others.
Yeah.
And I 100% agree.
I think the other piece that's important to remember is statistically, only 1/3 of physicians graduate from med school having taken one nutrition class.
Mm.
So we go, huh, all right. One of the things that I say is stop asking people for directions that they haven't been. And so we get to have our eyes wide open. If you're wanting a diagnosis and a prescription or a surgery as part of your plan, then going to a mainstream provider makes perfect sense. But the individuals that I see, they come to me saying, I've seen a gazillion different providers. I'm being told it's either all in my head, my labs look normal, or all they want to do is prescribe me something. And I don't feel heard. I don't feel seen. I don't feel like they're getting to root cause, or they're making me seem like I'm just crazy. And these women are saying, no, this is not normal for me. And just because it's common does not mean it's normal. I want to age through my 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s with total vitality.
Mm.
And I think it's fair to expect. And no, it's not fair to expect that you're going to be exhausted and not sleep and putting on a bunch of extra weight and feeling like your PMS completely takes you down or bleeding time that is so painful you can't handle life. You know, for women to say, I have no libido, I go, gosh, their providers just want to put them on an antidepressant. And I'm not saying all antidepressants are bad, but there are so many other factors that we can look at to look under the hood.
Oh, for sure. I agree again 100% with everything that you just shared. It's very easy to just say, "Here, take this pill," and bye. But we deserve more than that, and we really have, I think, come to a point where we're all just, "You know what? That's not gonna do it anymore. I want more than that. I deserve more than that. I need help," without somebody just saying, "It's all in your head." Because, we all know it's not just in our head. So many other women are experiencing these things that it's not just me. Or it's not just you. It's not just
Yeah.
one person that this is happening consistently across the board. And so we have to address that. Why? We need to look at all of the factors in play. Like you said, stress levels, that's huge. If you're not getting enough sleep, that's another one. I had a guest on who was fantastic talking about skilled sleeping and what a difference that can make in your life. There's so many parts of this that are important in determining what kind of difference we can make in our overall health. So thank you again for sharing that and really, reiterating the importance of looking at the whole picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk then a little bit about when we're talking about hormonal imbalances and how that really plays into so many parts of our life, our mood. You mentioned sexual libido, just so many areas. Let's talk about that and what we can start to look at, how we can bring those back into balance.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm not sure our hormones are ever really in balance. They're constantly
Mhm.
changing. They're constantly changing each day, each week, each month, each decade, depending on if you are ovulating on a regular basis, if you've been on hormonal contraception, if you're pregnant, if you're postpartum, where you are in the perimenopause chapter. Perimenopause can start as early as age 35. And then perimenopause ends once we enter menopause. What's menopause? That's once we've gone 12 months without a menstrual bleed. And even within perimenopause, there are three distinct phases. And so when we look at our hormonal well being, there are also a lot of different hormones. So there's our sex hormones that we think of, our estrogen, our progesterone, and our testosterone. And I'll probably spend most of my time focused on those. But I think it's also important that we remember our adrenal hormones. That's predominantly going to be cortisol and DHEA. Cortisol also changes throughout a day. When I look at a 24-hour cortisol curve, I want it to spike within 30 minutes of waking and stay elevated and then come down right after the 1 hour mark. And then in the afternoon, there's a little bump. And then as we get ready for sleep. So for someone who goes in and gets a blood test looking at their cortisol and it says it's high or low, it's irrelevant
Mm.
because it's in relationship to what? And what time in the day were we looking at? And then DHEA, that's actually a hormone precursor. So it turns into estrogen and testosterone. And then there's obviously, there's hormones of mood like dopamine and oxytocin and endorphins. But let's stay focused just on the sex hormones for now. And then we can always add more. They're really going to be regulating our menstrual cycle and our ovulation, our energy level, our mood. And so if you're menstruating, it tells me you're ovulating. The things I want you to know is the first half of your cycle is what's called estrogen dominant. Okay. Some people know it as the follicular phase. I break down into 4 seasons. So our bleeding time would be our winter time. The next week would be our springtime. That's where estrogen is building. It's very proliferative. Okay. Estrogen builds, it builds our endometrial lining, which would be the place where implantation would take place if we got pregnant. It builds breast tissue. It builds resiliency. It builds confidence. Helps build muscle mass and helps build collagen. And so that's a time where we're very resilient. Okay. We can be out in the world and creative and brainstorming with the team. Our lights are shining outside, which means we're not going to take so many things personally. And then we move into our ovulatory phase when we're ovulating. And now we have estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, which is going to give us confidence and a strong sense of libido and more energy. And we have this kind of super magnetic sense. Okay. That's the time for a woman if she wants to push heavy weight in the gym or push an intermittent fast. Her body's super resilient. You can go out and have the tough conversations with your boss or your husband, and you're not going to necessarily take it personally. And so, assuming you ovulate, ovulation is considered the main event, and it's what stimulates production of progesterone. Now we move into our luteal phase or the fall time, which is progesterone heavy. And progesterone is like the hormone. I always think of it as satin. It's very soft, it's soothing, it's nourishing, it's nurturing, it's the hormone of the mother. It's what helps maintain pregnancy. But it's also a hormone that will hide if we have a lot of stress. It's a hormone that needs carbohydrates to be produced. So if we're pushing the stress levels, pushing, a reduced caloric intake time with intermittent fasting, or push too hard with exercise, progesterone won't be produced. Progesterone helps maintain our mood stability. What can happen is sometimes that can be the PMS time where we're just a little bit more like viper, a little bit more feisty. Our inner critic is elevated at this point. And when the estrogen time, our springtime, was when all the lights were on externally and water could just roll off our back like a duck. During this progesterone dominant time, lights are on inside. So we feel more like a longing for nourishment. We're more likely to take things personally, okay? And then all the hormones go down and we bleed. So for a woman who comes to me and she's having menstrual migraines, heavy bleeding, irregular bleeding, hot flashes, these are all signs of things being off with estrogen and progesterone. And what we can do is we can look at the rhythm of when they're happening mixed with the rhythm of her bleeding, and it tells me a lot. I could go on, but when you think about for you personally or your audience, any specific direction you want me to take that?
First of all, I have to say, Mariah, thank you so much for sharing all of that detail. That was fantastic. There was so many things in there I had no idea,
Yeah.
honestly. And as you just described the cycle and relating it to the different seasons of a year, I think that was fantastic. And what a great way to visualize it
Mhm.
as you were really detailing all of the specifics in the different types of hormones that are in play in the different periods. So I think that was just tremendous. So thank you so much for that. And really, I feel we certainly could go any number of direction from this point in our conversation. But I want to talk about what you shared in there, and that's the point of doing the blood work and how it is almost like, what time of day did this get taken? And really, I would have had no idea that could play into the results that you're going to get in these numbers. And I think that's a fair point that we need to consider when we're getting these types of lab work completed and we're getting these results and we're like, what does this mean? And should I be concerned? We also need to take into account when did it occur in the day? And also perhaps when did it occur in our cycle?
Totally, totally. Because just take what I just said. Okay, let's talk about some tests. Everybody, you're going to want pen and paper. So, first, if you're wanting to really know where is my estrogen and my progesterone, it's not just what's my estrogen and what is my progesterone, but what is the relationship between the two of them. And once again, if you have your blood drawn, if you're still ovulating, if you have your blood drawn in the first half of the cycle, of course, there's not going to be very much progesterone. Whereas if you have the blood drawn during your luteal phase or your fall time, where progesterone is the predominant hormone, we should see that your estrogen and your progesterone are at pretty equal levels. And so, generally, for me, when I'm looking at a woman's hormones, my favorite test right now, there's no perfect test. I interview people on my podcast all the time. I'm always looking. Everybody thinks this one's the best or that one's the best. I don't think that there's a perfect test right now, but the one that I like the best that I consistently go to is called the Dutch Plus test. And I'm able to look at a woman and a man, but we're talking about women mainly here. I'm able to look at a woman's estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, as well as a 24-hour cortisol curve. And what does her body do with those hormones? How does she detoxify? How does she what's called methylate? And that's always done between day about 18 and 22 of her menstrual cycle. And so I know, okay, this is what's fair to expect with estrogen and progesterone and testosterone at this point in your menstrual cycle. Let's look at where it is. If there's a big gap and estrogen is super high and progesterone is super low, that woman has likely been diagnosed with fibroids. Maybe she has fibrocystic breasts. Maybe she has really painful menstrual cycles, heavy bleeds, pretty intense irritability during the PMS time. She might also have a predisposition towards estrogen dependent cancers. And so then I can look at, okay, what does her body do with the estrogen? And there are 3 different pathways that a woman will methylate down. And that's predisposed through genetics. And so I can go in with lifestyle and supplementation and diet modification to help shift that. Because once again, our genes load the gun. Our lifestyle is what pulls the trigger. So just because we were handed a specific genetic code does not mean that we are predestined. And so the Dutch Plus test, we're looking through urine and we're looking through saliva. Now, when it comes to thyroid testing, that's going to be done via blood. But for all of you, when you're done with this podcast, or maybe push pause and go see if you can find your most recent blood work, very likely your provider ordered what's called a TSH. That's a thyroid stimulating hormone. It doesn't actually come from your thyroid. It comes from your pituitary, but it's in communication with your thyroid. I want to see your TSH between 1 and 2. Okay. So if you're someone who's feeling sluggish, putting on extra weight, can't sleep, feel cold all the time, maybe sad, maybe lean towards constipation, and your TSH is above 2, it is very possible that you have an undiagnosed sluggish thyroid that's just been missed. So thyroid, I want to see a TSH, a free T4, a free T3, and your thyroid antibodies. The other test that is one of my favorites that is really related to this conversation, and it might surprise you, is called a GI map. So it's actually a poop test, looks at your stool. So our gut microbiome is directly related to our hormonal well-being. It's directly related to our mood and our brain fog and our energy level, our body's ability to absorb the nutrients from the food that we eat. 90% of our serotonin comes from our gut. 70% of our immune system exists in our gut. It's the second brain. And so when we're looking at testing with the poop test, it can be any time in the month. Thyroid test, same thing, anytime in the day, any time of the month. Whereas if we're doing the Dutch Plus test, that's going to be between day 18 and 22, or if you're beyond menopause at any point, but they're collecting at distinct points throughout the day. So I can see, all right, what is the curve here? For some women, their adrenals wake up great, but then spike right before bed. And I go, now that explains a lot why you're not sleeping. Maybe I made the assumption that it's that they're overdoing it on caffeine, or they're having estrogen drops while they're sleeping, which is activating adrenaline and waking them up. Or maybe I could have assumed that they had blood sugar dysregulation and go that route. But if I can look at a 24-hour cortisol curve and I go, oh, it's your cortisol that's spiking. Now, what can we do to help your adrenals and your stress levels during that specific time in the day? And voila, now you're sleeping well. Yeah. So just because your provider has told you that they've tested you for whatever it is that you think that you have, I want you to really stay in self-advocacy. For the first 8 years I was in practice, I just didn't know any better. And I was ordering the same tests. And I was also, okay, hot flashes, you can go on antidepressants or you could go on the pill or HRT. What do you want? That's what I was taught. And I was doing the best with what I had. But then as I had my own health scare, and then I was introduced to the Institute of Functional Medicine, and I did a deep dive. I've always believed in food as medicine, but as it's grown, I go, wow, there's so much more here that we can look at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Again, Mariah, so much knowledge that you are just dishing out to us right now. And I love that you said pause and take some notes and talk to your doctor about these things because that's fantastic. I think we really, like you pointed out, do need to be our own biggest advocate when we're talking to our healthcare providers to make sure that, they're not dismissing something just out of hand. I love that. And again, the detail of information that you have provided to us has just been phenomenal. Thank you so much. I'm sure the listeners are going to have to pause, rewind, listen again because there's just so much great information here. But I want to switch gears a little bit now and talk about you share 5 hacks, if you will, that are related to libido and specifically about how you can be turned on with your life, be turned on with your lover, and with yourself. And I'm so excited to learn more about this. So share that with us now, if you would.
Oh, my 5 hacks. That was probably from one of my episodes. And one thing just to say, if that last piece around all of the testing left you overwhelmed, and you don't know where to start, just reach out, okay? I have clients in 3 different continents, I think 5 different countries right now, and I can just order all of your labs for you. So just know that if you're like, "I don't know where to begin," or "I live in a small town," or "I've gone to providers," just reach out and we'll figure something out. Okay, so hack number 1 would be, I think you mentioned it, it's acknowledging that we wanna feel turned on by our life, our lover, and ourselves. I think sometimes when we're talking about libido, we put it in this box of it being just our sexual desire, but desire is desire. Pleasure is pleasure. And so the more that we can expand a lifestyle of pleasure to be able to drink some, I have this amazing water bottle with my crystal inside of it, and I want to take a sip of it and really feel it go down my throat and allow myself to experience pleasure. That's going to influence my libido. If I want to look outside the window and acknowledge the beauty in the clouds right now in the blue skies, it's about for all of us to expand our experience of pleasure so that it's not just in the confines of our sexuality, but do I feel turned on by the life that I'm waking up to? Do I feel turned on by the way in which I'm looking at myself in the mirror? Do I feel turned on by my lover? And often what happens is I'll say, is it that you're not turned on by what your lover is providing you, is offering you? And so if we dig specifically into libido in the realm of sensuality and sexuality, particularly for individuals that are in heterosexual relationships, there's a big discrepancy in this feminine and masculine energy. Sometimes we're just not turned on by what's being offered. And so we have the privilege of being able to speak up for ourselves and communicate what does turn us on. Okay. To really say, all right, how am I taking steps each day to expand how I feel turned on by myself, who I'm being, not just what I'm doing, by my life, the way that I'm approaching it, through what mind's eye am I choosing to see the world, and my lover. Number 2 is my mindset. I think libido is probably 80 to 90% in our brain and 10, max 20% physiologic. So, of course, I'll talk about the hormones of libido, but really, am I allowing myself to receive? Am I acknowledging that for the most part, a woman's arousal system is responsive, whereas a male bodied individual's arousal system is spontaneous? Meaning, for most men, they're ready to go. They see a naked woman, they're turned on, and they're erect, good to go. Whereas for most women, our arousal is responsive. We are responding based on our love language, right? If your love language is gifts and someone gave you a fresh bouquet of roses, And acts of service really goes a long way for you. And someone swept the floors or did an errand for you or gave you a foot rub. That is part of a woman's arousal system, and it goes on all day long. So there's a lot of spaciousness for those of us that are in heterosexual relationships to have, and even non heterosexual, but just to have conversations with, what is it that actually turns me on? And I'm not ready just like that. But I need to feel heard and I need to feel seen. And maybe I need a little bit of spaciousness to wind down from my day and turn my brain off. Or for some, I have to have the door locked because I'm afraid the kids are going to walk in the door. Or actually, I need to be out of my house because if there's any chance of my kids hearing me, it's not going to happen. Right. So just navigating this relationship with our arousal, our love languages, and acknowledging that there are big differences between a male bodied individual and a female bodied individual, and not to judge it, but to embrace it and find ways to communicate and ask and explore and be in curiosity. Next, I'll talk about hormones. So, the big hormones at play with libido, testosterone is one of them and cortisol is the other. So, cortisol is that fight, flight, or freeze or fawn hormone of the adrenals. It helps us keep us safe, but it is kryptonite to the libido. Okay. Cortisol is kryptonite to the libido. If we are stressed out or preoccupied, there will be no juiciness happening downstairs. And so for women, I love Alison Armstrong. She's studied the male and female brain for decades. And she says that women have what's called diffuse awareness, where we're aware of all things at all times. So I can walk downstairs and I can see that there's books that need to be put away and dishes that need to be done. I'm thinking of the appointments that need to be made, the podcast interview that I'm going to do, getting the kids on time, the dog knocked over the water, whatever it does. But all of these things are literally yelling at me at equal decibel of sound. Whereas for a male brained individual, there is not diffuse awareness, it's singular awareness. They're hunting. Find the deer, shoot the deer, carry the deer home. So, how many men? I love this example Alison Armstrong gives where he looks in the pantry and he's looking for refried beans. There's no refried beans in here. I'm going to the store. I'm going to go get it. And then you go and all you have to do is move the beans out. It's like right behind, but there's just like single focus. When we have stress level that's high, we're caring for all people, juggling all the balls, multitasking, and all of these things are yelling at us at equal decibel of sound. It's emotional labor that is playing in the background, and it's kryptonite to our libido. So for each of us to get clear with how do I wind down? How do I prioritize myself? And so that's going to help the cortisol levels go down, which helps arousal come up. Testosterone, some women end up trying testosterone creams from a bioidentical perspective. Things that can help your testosterone level, number one is quality sleep. The majority of our testosterone is produced when we get quality sleep. Number two is weight-bearing exercise. I would start there. Sometimes some bioidentical testosterone can make a difference. The research shows that it has statistically significant impact on a woman's experience of orgasm specifically and enhancing that. Mhm. And one of the things as women progress through perimenopause and into menopause is often it's not just vaginal dryness and pain, but almost like a numbing effect. Women will say to me they just don't have as much sensation down there. It's like all of a sudden there's a veil. So it's taking them a lot longer to reach orgasm. And so from a testosterone perspective, sometimes that's helpful, but also vaginal DHEA can be helpful. There is something called an O shot or PRP. There's vaginal rejuvenation. There's a lot of different things that can be done vaginally just to wake up that area. And I think the last thing that I want to talk about is erotic blueprint. I love erotic blueprints. Jaya Love developed an erotic blueprint quiz. I can give you the link. It's a free quiz. There's a version for $17. I say just do the free one. And it's like exploring your love languages. Is my love language quality time? Is it acts of service? Is it touch? In the same way, erotic blueprints, is my erotic blueprint sexual or energetic or kinky, shapeshifter? And when you do the quiz, I think it's really fun if you're in partnership for both of you to do the quiz at the same time. And then right afterwards, a little video pops up describing your erotic blueprint type. And it's, oh, there can be these moments of no wonder. In my scenario, my husband is energetic and I'm sensual. And we didn't know this for the first 16 years of our marriage. And then it was like, no wonder. Like in his scenario, lovemaking is like this esoteric experience where he sees colors and, doesn't necessarily even need touch. Whereas for me, if there's a pile of laundry in this corner of the room, I'm completely preoccupied. I'll get caught up in my head and I'm like, oh gosh, wait, my body. The lotion and aromatherapy and music goes a really long way. The aesthetics of the room and long extended foreplay, but I'm sensual. And so as we both understood this about one another and explored it, we went, wow, we're better understanding one another, but more than anything, I'm better understanding myself. I can be in the place of self-advocacy. So I'm understanding my arousal system. I'm understanding my turn-ons and my turn-offs. I'm asking for support and help. I'm playing around, being curious with my erotic blueprint. I'm getting support with my hormonal vitality and foundation, right? And sometimes that's better nutrition. Sometimes that's getting your stool testing to see what's going on there. There's a lot of factors here, but they all influence our libido. And then I mentioned feeling turned on by your life, your lover, and yourself. Where once again, we don't exist in a silo. It's not like you're just going to go get a testosterone pellet and voila, everything's fixed. If you feel really unfulfilled by your life, or you don't feel filled up by the dynamic of your partnership, and you don't feel turned on by what's being offered to you, you don't feel heard and seen. Yeah, hopefully that helps.
Oh my gosh, it was so helpful. And the tools that you just shared, the resources, I will for sure include those in the show notes for the listeners to go check out because I think that's phenomenal. Anytime that we can learn about ourselves and how we just are innately, I think that's just phenomenal. We can grow so much from there. And in partnership, like you suggested, having both partners take the quiz and discover if maybe this has been the key or the factor that you haven't really been on the same page. And now you can explore how do we get there together. And so I love that. And the point that you made about women can walk into a room and you see the 15,000 things
Yes.
that need to be done or handled, and the man just sees the one thing, and the description of trying to find an item, whether it's the refrigerator, the cupboard, the pantry, wherever, it's like, just slide something over and there it is. I think every woman who is listening can relate to that experience
Yeah.
because that has happened in their life. I know for sure it's been mine. So, thank you again, Mariah, for the detail that you have just shared with us is just fantastic. I love it so much. I feel like we could just continue this conversation because we have just barely scratched the surface, but I know you've mentioned your podcast, and I want you to talk to us a little bit about that so that the listeners can find out more about what you're discussing and follow you for more information because you
Yeah.
go into so much more depth on your
Sure.
shows.
Yeah, it's called the Women's Vibrancy Code podcast. We're right around, as we're recording this, I think I'm around episode like 107. So there's a lot that's there. Usually there are guest experts as well as solo episodes, and it's a lot of what I've already talked about. I would just go and explore, scroll through, and it's on all of the platforms. You can also just go to marayabrown.com and then you can see on the top tab. Oh, and Maraya is spelled all with A's. So it's Maraya. So Maraya Brown, like the color.com. Click on podcast and you can see all the episodes there as well. And binge, have some fun. Please leave a review, share with friends. It's my way to offer up my knowledge and amazing guest experts for free to the masses, and it's a really fun journey to do. There's been some amazing experts that I'm humbled to, even Alison Armstrong, the one that I referenced, she's way back in, like, my first 10 episodes, I wanna say. That one was a fun one. It's definitely worth taking a peek, and I really am very approachable. I keep my practice small and intimate, whether it's women's retreats or a year-long deep dive that includes one-on-one and group community as well as testing. There's a membership, there's personalized packages that are all one-on-one, and I have a team of master coaches. So just reach out if any of this leaves you feeling curious. Uh, it's fun to be able to support women and, ironically, now supporting men as well. So over the last couple years, many of my female clients have brought in their husbands or their brothers or their friends. And so now that's been a fun nuance to add in as well.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that with us. Definitely, I'll include that information in the show notes, your website, the podcast information, so the listeners can find you. And one of the things I always love to ask my guests is if there's any books that they have found beneficial or influential that they would like to share with the listeners. So,
Yeah.
is there something you'd like to share with us?
Yeah. Okay, let's think. Seed of the Soul. I don't know if have
Mm.
you read Seed of the Soul? Yeah, I think that's one of those that, for so many reasons, is worth a read. From more of a personal development, esoteric, who I want to be in the world, answering broader questions. And that's near and dear to me because Gary Zukov, who's the author, is a dear friend. He spends Christmas and Thanksgiving with us. And over the last 4 years, I've had the opportunity to be in the room with some legends, you know, celebrity status, people who've established great wealth and lead large groups of people. And one of the things that's amazing about Gary is he really walks his talk. Like,
Mm.
he is such a consistent human being, and everything that is in that book, I promise you, I have spent so much time with this man, and he really lives and breathes it. So Seed of the Soul, I've gotta put that in. I've mentioned Alison Armstrong a few times, and so for anyone who's on Audible, Celebrating Partnership is a workshop that she did, and it's recorded. I think it's so potent, so powerful to listen to. And then the other thing I would add is, right now, my husband and I are reading together Way of the Superior Man by David Deida. And at first I felt confronted by it. When I read the table of contents, it was like, no, and I don't want him to read it. But along my journey, we didn't touch on this, but there's so much around feminine and masculine energy. And my business grew really fast. And so July of 2021, as a family, we decided to bring my husband home as a stay-at-home dad.
Mhm.
And there were a lot of reasons why we made that decision, partially because my work is virtual and we wanted to travel, but also fires came through my valley where I live. And it was a really traumatizing day for me. And I haven't felt ready to be here in Southern Oregon in the summertime.
Mhm.
And so we opted to bring him home, and he was playing a fractional CFO, and it worked until it really didn't work. And what I realize is in our relationship dynamic and family dynamic, I really respect a man who has his own vision and his own thing that he brings home to the family unit. It's not even about money. And that got degraded. And so what ended up happening is I stepped more into my masculine. And here I was running a business, the breadwinner for the family, and he slowly felt more and more depleted. And I think he became sad. I think it just really wasn't working. And so right now, in these last 4 to 5 months, we're actively recalibrating. And he's back doing what he loves and in his masculine energy and bringing it back. And I feel this sense of like being cared for. There's a new sense of safety where I can then surrender into my feminine in new and spectacular ways that serve the family dynamic even better. And so right now we're reading together Way of the Superior Man, and it's been really lovely for both of us. For me to look at, as an ambitious woman who maybe emasculated her husband a little bit too much, to be able to check myself, and also for him to find new ways at his own chapter of recalibration and finding a new version of him to stand in his own masculine power.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Great recommendations. Thank you so much for sharing those. I
Mhm.
will for sure include that detail in the show notes. Besides your podcast, Mariah, is there any others that you enjoy listening that you'd like to share with us?
Ooh, that's fun. What are some of my top right now? I'm thinking around the ones that I listen to most often. The Goop podcast. I love me some Gwyneth Paltrow. What's the Juice by Organic Olivia? When I want to
Mm.
geek out on nutrition and adrenal well-being and herbs, I will say her episodes are lengthy. I don't think I've ever been able to listen to an entire episode, but that's always fun. And then the Dutch company, when I referenced my favorite test to look at adrenals and hormones and detoxification, it's the Dutch company, DUTCH. It stands for Dried Urine Total Comprehensive Hormones. They have their own podcast, so it's called the Dutch Podcast. And as a healthcare provider, I definitely geek out on that one, and I love listening and digging into nuances of the test. For all the listeners, that one might not be as much fun for you, though.
But excellent recommendations. Again, thank you for sharing them and nice variety too. I think you've got some fun stuff and some more serious, in depth topics. And so, great recommendations
Thank
for the
you.
listeners to check out. And lastly, Mariah, before we close out, would you share again with us your website and any other socials where people can follow along and your journey and what you're doing and reach out to you if they have questions?
Sure. So, as long as you remember Maraya Brown, Maraya color brown, you're going to be able to find me. So, marayabrown.com. I've got a lot of free resources on the site, some blogs, the podcast, and you're welcome to just click on get started, fill out the application, and let's have a chat. And then from a social media perspective, you're mainly going to find me on Facebook and Instagram. So Maraya Brown. On Instagram, there is an underscore at the beginning and the end of my name. My YouTube channel, Maraya Brown. LinkedIn, Maraya Brown, although I'm not there very much. It's one of the things on the to-do list at some point. And even email is Mariah at marayabrown.com. Like I said, I'm very approachable. You're welcome to just reach out and say, here's what I'm struggling with. Here's what I've tried. And can you help? I will say that most of the clients that I work with tend to be ambitious. They're not willing to go belly up to status quo, and they are ready to invest with time, energy, and money. This is not a done for you or a quick fix. It's done with you, but I do vet the clients that I say yes to. And I need to know that you're going to be willing to take the steps and actually make some shifts, sometimes subtle, sometimes big, with nutrition and lifestyle and mindset and supplementation. And we find a package that works for you. Maybe it starts with coming to one of the retreats. Depending on when this goes live, my next retreat is April 12th, 13th, and 14th in Ashland, Oregon. And I hand select who's brought into that space. And maybe it starts with the membership. Maybe it starts with just let's do some simple testing and have a couple visits. And maybe you're someone who you're like, no, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. I want the deep dive. I want the full transformation. And that's when I'm like, yeah, girl, let's go. That's who I love talking to, is the woman who says, I know I want to live a spectacular existence, to have total vitality. And I know that my foundational wellness is getting in my way because I'm tired. I'm looking in the mirror and I'm not feeling confident. I'm not feeling turned on. I'm struggling with bloating and gassiness or sleep deprivation or hot flashes or irritability, PMS, whatever it may be. Like, let's get that out of the way so that the lights turn on in the room. And now we get to turn your life on fire. And that's when we really have a lot of fun.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And,
Mhm.
that's 100% valid. You have got to be invested in making the difference in your life if you want the changes to happen. You can't just expect it to be overnight or that it's just going to be like that, or I'm not really going to have to put the effort in. If you want real lasting change, you've got to put the effort in, right?
Yeah. And the key is you use the word lasting,
Mm,
because here we either invest now or we end up paying way more later.
mm,
It's like brushing your teeth or flossing. I don't brush my teeth thinking, this feels so good that I'm not getting a cavity right now, but I still do it. And if I don't, we all know the consequences in the long run.
yes.
And so you have the privilege of being able to invest now, and we get to celebrate the prevention of the things that we will never know that we prevented,
Mm,
and the turning of the ship, so to speak, to go, the trajectory currently is not what I want. Turn the ship. Yeah. Yeah.
tremendous. Oh my gosh, Mariah, thank you again so much for joining us on the show and sharing all of this amazing knowledge with us. I
Mhm.
can't thank you enough. It's been wonderful, and I've so appreciated your time. Thank you again.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
We'll talk more soon.
Good.
Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.